Welcome to the Institute of Economic Affairs YouTube channel. My name is Lesh and I'm the Head of Public Policy here at the IEA. Today I have the great pleasure of being joined by the free market, libertarian, champion, hero economist, Deirdre McCloskey. McCloskey trained at Harvard in the 1960s as an economist, has written 20 books and some 400 academic articles on issues ranging from economic theory to statistical theory, feminism, law, ethics. She taught at the University of Chicago in the economics department during its glory days. Welcome back to the IEA.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm always glad to be here.
So you describe yourself as literary, quantitative, postmodern, free market, progressive, Episcopalian, ex-Marxist, Midwestern, woman from Boston, who was once a man, not conservative. I'm a Christian, classical liberal. So kind of start unpacking that and how that maybe influences your views and made you who you are today in terms of such a kind of star intellectual thinker. Quantitative, but with a literary background. So what do you think, how do you think literature plays into your kind of economic thinking?
Well, it plays in more and more. In 1980s, I decided to become educated, so I started to read the TLS and to learn Latin and Greek, and I came to understand how important talk was in the economy, persuasion, sweet talk, and how important. This all took a long time. I'm not saying, bang, I got it, but how important ethics are in the economy, how important, as an analyst of the economy looking down on it, how important the categories are we choose, national income, this or that. So it turns out that there's a massive amount of humanistic thinking which would go into a good economist. This is something that Marshall and Keynes said. You can't be a good economist if you're only an economist. And I think a lot of modern economists don't get this. They think that, well, we'll just do more math and that'll be all we need. We don't need to talk about sociology or literature or theology or anything. And I've increasingly come to think that humanomics, as we call it, the little teeny group of economists who are interested in this, is how economics ought to go. So it ought to be the Institute of Humanomical Affairs.
I mean, I think the way economics is often taught pushes against that.
It really does.
These days, when I was studying economics at university, we didn't really talk at all about history or different economic theories. Yeah. It was all very much, here's a supply and demand graph. Right. Here's a theory about the way the economy operates. Yeah. Yeah. Here's a mathematical equation. And the deeper you went in, the further you went along with economics education, the more you just had statistical models.
Well, I'm very much in favor of statistics, numbers. I'm a quantitative person, as I say in that description. I believe that a lot of social issues, especially ones that are spoken about at the IEA, are matters of how much, how big. I was trained a lot by engineers, and that's their attitude. How big, how big, how big? They got to do it or the bridge will fall down. But, and I'm certainly not against mathematics. I think economists should know more mathematics than what they know now. But they got the wrong mathematics, and I could go into the details of that, but they aren't really thinking about statistics or mathematics in sensible, useful ways. And when you do, you discover that well, it's rather obvious in a statistical study that the choice of variables that you put in the equation matter a great deal. And that is frequently a humanistic question. It's a question of looking back on language and thinking philosophically or historically about what humans are interested in. And then at the end of the exercise, which is very much on the IEA side, you have to ask, so what? What's the importance? Not the statistical significance, which is a terrible error in technical economics, but the importance of what you've done, how it matters for the world.
So the next part of your position there, so you're a free marketeer, but you describe yourself as a postmodernist. Now,
I am postmodern now. Most people think of postmodern as, oh, they're crazies.
The Frankfurt School, the Marxists.
I admire the Frankfurt School. I'm not a Marxist. I was. When I was a kid, I was a Marxist, but I grew out of it. The old joke is, if you're not a socialist when you're 16, you have no heart. If you're still one when you're 26, you have no brain. And I've adjusted the figures to fit my own case. But, for example, Foucault, obviously postmodern thinker in France, towards the end of his life, shortened alas by AIDS, he started to read seriously Milton Friedman and Gary Becker, and wrote very intelligently about them, because he was drifting towards the view that being queer it's not a smart move if you're queer to turn to the state, because it turns out that the state in Northern Europe, not in Southern Europe, but Northern Europe, made it criminally wrong to be homosexual, for instance, as Foucault was. So he was starting to see that non-state alternatives in our lives have great value, and that these people, Friedman and Becker, were saying so.
I mean, I'm also fascinated by the kind of link between kind of a Hayekian knowledge view perspective. You know, knowledge is dispersed. We don't have the full capacity to essentially control the economy as a result of the fact that no central planner can make those decisions. In a different sense, you know, Foucault or Derrida kind of focuses on the power of knowledge and literature.
Exactly.
And there's definitely, you know, kind of intellectual comparisons there.
There is, and I found it in the 1980s and was all excited about it, because, look, the basic point of postmodernism, now look, they're crazies, I admit, but they're crazies on both sides. There are crazies on the modernist side, mechanical economists who don't think about anything else but the statistical significance or the existence theorem. That's bonkers. And then on the other side, there are the postmodernists who say, words, all that matters, nothing matters, truth is no truth, and so on and so forth. I'm right now writing a paper with the great sociologist of science at Cardiff, Harry Collins, on this very matter, about how politics would be improved if we agreed that science produces truth, but not capital T truth, small t truth. And it's small t truth that postmoderns of a sensible sort, when they're sensible, do very well with. Look, numbers don't come with their own interpretation. Either do words. That's really all postmodernism says.
And it's a great insight. If you think about the way in which we as a society choose to focus on different topics over time, or the way we interpret different kind of claims and debate, it seems blatantly obvious to me that there's good insight there. I mean, the postmodernists, I think, get themselves in a trap, a very clear and obvious trap, which is, if you say there's no such thing as truth, then how can you claim that even that statement has a sense of truth to it? You're making a truthful statement.
Well, that's right. But I regard that particular elenchus, as the Greeks would say, is kind of cheap. I don't approve of that argument that, you're claiming there's truth about non-truth. But on the other hand, in economic policy, the kind of assumptions you start with, not just assumptions, but the attitudes you start with, are crucial. I'm going to give a talk tomorrow night at the LSE called The Impossibility of Policy, where I'm going to go after the assumptions in policy that are just kind of silly. Let's take an easy case. Stop-go policy in this country in the 1950s and 60s, macro policy. Every time the balance of payments started to go the wrong way, what they called the wrong way, they all got panicked and raised bank rate and caused a recession. It was stupid. And now everyone agrees it was stupid. At the time, it was the height of wisdom. And it's not because there's been new econometric findings or something. That's not. It's because the economists doing policy have gotten a little bit more, how can I say, they're not quite as mechanically focused on the balance of payments as they were before.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was rereading Capitalism and Freedom, which was, I think, originally written in the 1960s.
60s, yeah. 60s.
And Friedman makes the very obvious today point, which was obviously profound then, that you can't have a controlled exchange rate combined with
control of inflation.
Can't
and
do both. A balance of payments. You got to choose one.
Yeah.
But I just want to move on, thinking about your great work and your great, I suppose, contribution in recent history has very much been around this idea of the great enrichment.
Indeed.
What is the great enrichment?
Well, it's simply a more scientifically sensible word for what we usually call industrialization or the Industrial Revolution, which are terms that are scientifically feeble and even misleading. And I think what's astonishing about the modern world is not that there was a brief period of growth from, 1750 to 1850, it's that it kept going. And income per head kept doubling in every long generation in Britain or the United States or France or then Japan and Botswana and so forth, kept doubling every 30 years or so, boom, 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 boom. And the world as a whole, according to the World Bank, is probably going to go on having doubling at 2% per year. That's about every 35 years of real income. And that's amazing. That's completely unprecedented. We call it the hockey stick, meaning not the field hockey stick that bends back, but the ice hockey stick. It thrills Swedish and Canadian economists to talk this way, that men playing ice hockey. And it completely transformed our lives. Your ancestors and mine were unspeakably poor. Mine were Irish and were illiterate. Among other things, they spent their whole life in a few villages. They may have been happy. They may have been ecstatic, playing a fiddle in the evening or something. But their scope of life, compared with ours, was dramatically lower.
I think what I'm interested in is the extent of, I suppose, great enrichment denial. So we're now, it's 70 years ago, the Queen began her reign, the great, I suppose, Second Elizabethan era. And there was a poll taken the other day that suggested, asked people, do you think the world's gotten better, worse, or stayed about the same? And 38% of people said that they thought the world has gotten better since 1952, 30% of people thought it had gotten worse, and 17% said neither. Now, to put that in perspective in my mind, 70 years ago, half of the people in this country did not have a bathroom.
Of course.
They didn't have indoor plumbing, just one very, let alone the internet.
They didn't have a fridge. I remember
the immense
putting the bottle of milk on the windowsill.
To keep it cool.
I did it to keep it cool.
Why do you think, I suppose, there's such, I don't know if it's retrospective nostalgia about the past, denial of progress? Do people have a sense of different kind of progress they're talking about?
It's all that. Look, change is distressing. Who moved my cheese? It's irritating. I mean, this morning I was trying to get my COVID thing arranged because the stupid American government still insists that you get a COVID test to come back to the United States. In Britain, you've become much more sensible. Okay, well, figuring out how to do it on my cell phone. I'm 79 years old, and the height of technological sophistication when I was a kid was the dial telephone. So, this thing that does everything but the washing up, I find very challenging. So there's the kind of that. Oh, it was so lovely. But that's why I emphasize the scope of human life. The scope is so much bigger. People have more education. It's not just the fridge and the and the motor and so forth. But it's the ways they can be human. I mean, the tremendous diversity of jobs you can have. We have less difficult, physically difficult jobs than we had in 1948 or 1953. We're much better off in that respect.
And what do you think has driven the Great Enrichment?
What caused it was ideas, and what caused it is liberalism. I have debates with my colleagues in economic history and in economics. I spoke a couple of nights ago to the London School of Economics and got some pushback on this, but in the end they have to agree that any change is irritating and people get angry about it, and that's a problem. But if they accept change, the change had to start in someone's brain. It had to be a mind act. And that's not all I'm saying. That's the core of what I'm saying. And a free society in which ideas can flourish, as Matt Ridley says, ideas have sex, innovations have sex with each other, and then the baby innovations have sex and the grandbaby, and et cetera, in this enormous explosion of innovation since 1800. That enriches us. It's not, and what I'm saying is that on the one hand, the conservative argument that it's investment is wrong, and on the other hand, the progressive argument that it's exploitation is wrong. You can show it, and I have. And what's left over is innovation, novelties, mechanical, biological, but also institutional, such as the divided highway, the motorway, which is just an idea.
And you've talked in the past how you kind of started in Holland and then it came to England and Scotland and then spread out in Europe and into the colonies. What do you think drove that? You know, and I suppose it's asking, what started the Big Bang? You know, who pressed the button on the Big Bang? But
it was God who pushed. I'm an Anglican, so I believe it was my Anglican God. But by the way, she is a middle-aged lesbian single mother, Black Briton, who works at the overweight, who works as a checker in Leeds at the Tesco. So get ready. But what pushed the button for the Great Enrichment was a series of accidents that northwestern Europe, Holland and England and Scotland and their offshoots, could then become liberal. The liberal idea is extremely new. It's an 18th century idea. The blessed Adam Smith's, what does he call it? The obvious and simple system of natural liberty. Its great triumph was the ending of slavery. But it was, it could have happened in Japan or the Ottoman Empire, northern India, China, but didn't. And by a series of fortunate accidents, the liberal idea was installed in the minds of northwestern Europeans who were highly illiberal before. Under the reign of the first Queen Elizabeth, England was not a liberal country. We talk of the Englishman's freedoms and all that, but come on, they were chopping off hands.
So it doesn't really go back to the Magna Carta.
It doesn't go back to Magna Carta. That was a Bill of Rights for barons, not for ordinary people.
Although you could probably, going back to your kind of postmodernist ideas there, the refinding of the Magna Carta in the 19th century.
Exactly.
It's kind of a sign of the change in times. We're going to ascribe these rights to history.
We're exceptionally badly informed about Magna Carta in the United States, and very frequently people who emphasize liberty in the economy think that Magna Carta was this great document that made Englishmen free. They don't ever mention English women, but still. And it's just not correct. But I don't want to sneer at them. As you said, it's a reading of history that's Whig and is, as Macaulay, Thomas Babington Macaulay was, he is liberal.
Does it not then feel like, I don't, if you say in some sense it was an accident, it could have very easily not happened?
For example, if the Spanish Armada had landed the best army in Europe on the south coast of England, as it was attempting to do, that would have been it. That would have been it for European liberalism. European liberalism was not going to come out of the Habsburg Empire.
So I think if you look at kind of I suppose maybe the peak period of liberalism, you could probably make an argument. We had all these ideas of liberty, particularly in the 19th century. Once you get into the, I suppose, World War I, World War II, the kind of Cold War era, in England, the fact that we had rationing well post-war period, highly regulated economy up until Thatcher came along.
British people my age remember the end of the sweets ration.
Which is a totally...
1953, I think it was, or 52.
Yeah, I mean, there was an article the other day in the Telegraph talking about why people were so much thinner when at the time of the coronation. Well, it was also because they didn't have any access to food.
Especially sweets.
I was worried reading that article, you're going to give the government an idea. They're going to tell us, they're going to start rationing food to stop us from getting obese. Yeah. But it's still somehow, I don't know, maybe muddling through the institutional setting that was created in the 19th century, we still continued to get richer in the 20th century.
We did.
And we got some of the kind of great innovations through that period.
We did. Look, vastly, most of the economy is still private. It's not, even though it's irritating that the share of expenditure of the central government and other levels of government is very high in Britain, and high in my country, and higher in France, always higher in France. Still, there's a tremendous scope for people to have a go, to start new businesses and so forth, and to move. Moving's an entrepreneurial act. When you move from the Northeast to London, you're making a great leap. And still more if you move from Afghanistan to London. You're making a great leap. It's very entrepreneurial. And there's still a lot of scope for that. And so we continue having new ideas. Every time I come to London, I see new things.
I mean, it feels sometimes so, particularly, I don't know whether you follow the debate closely in the UK, but there's very much been a push against the idea of people moving to London.
I know that. And that's why I mention it. I am familiar with this, not terribly familiar, but I know about it.
This idea of levelling up as the government's...
Levelling up, and it's silly, because levelling up means that we're going to give aid, now hear my words carefully, to the Northeast, as though it was to the land of Durham. Now wait a second. Are we giving aid to land or to people? Are we giving land to high street merchants at Durham? Or are we giving rent? Or are we giving help to workers? And the help to workers is for them to move where there's work. That's the best welfare program there is. And everyone knows it. Look, since 1800, income per head of ordinary people in Britain, and the poorest among them, has increased by a factor of about 20. That's roughly 2,000%. And the best you can do with a little leveling up where you give the money to Northumbria, why Northumbria? You give it to Northumbria and people stay there in Durham or wherever. That may increase their income over what it would have been if they just stayed there and starved, or by 10% or 50%. It's the 2,000% that you want to get. It's the big increases. So it's just madness to do this kind of thing. You should let the economy find its way, and people will be better off. They'll have more scope. They won't necessarily be happier. You can be happy as a pig in mud, as we used to say in Iowa, just sitting there in the mud, and that's nice. But happiness is this crazy measurement of happiness that economists go in for now. It's a completely wacko. But anyway, the happiness is not the point.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like to see the government focus a lot more on what are the barriers to people being able to move.
That's right. It's equality of permission, not of outcome. That's Rousseau and socialism. Not equality of opportunity, which is a nice thing. I wish everyone could go to the best high schools and so on, but it's very hard to achieve, and actually it's impossible to achieve, because your parents or mine were not the same. And I had the good taste to choose parents who were my father was a professor at Harvard, and my mother was an opera singer. So I get full credit for choosing parents. This is crazy. Equality of opportunity is not achievable. Equality of permission is. And the permission to build housing, which, as you know, is clotted in this country to an extraordinary extent, is one of the main things that keeps people where they are.
And
wherever it is.
Yeah, stops them having that opportunity to go and get a higher productivity, better paying job. I mean, economists talk about amalgamation effects, which I think is probably arguably just another reflection of what the magic that can happen when lots of people get together and, as Matt Ridley says, ideas have sex, and then you get that kind of creation and entrepreneurialism. But you're not going to get that when people are unnecessarily distributed and there's an element of this which is a bucolic nostalgia. I mean, English people just love the village, and they're just mad about villages. I was in one for a couple of days early this week, and it's very nice, and everyone knows the vicar, and there's the local idiot, and I mean, it's all very, very nice and sweet, but it's and we shouldn't be taxing some people to give some other people the right to indulge their bucolic nostalgia. For instance, subsidies to farmers are, in my view, just evil. Because you're English and you think, oh, the countryside is so beautiful, let's help the farmers at the expense of people who buy food. So, that's a decision that Britain made against it in the 1840s, and I wish they'd stick with it. Yeah, unfortunately, we're still recreating the EU subsidy system for farmers. I just want to move and think of some of, I suppose, the threats to liberty, and it seems like very much on both sides of the political spectrum, both in the UK and the US, we've got this new sense of a greater role for the state. We've got the left demanding, their senses of regulation and redistribution. You've got the right talking about how, free market capitalism has destroyed communities and free trade has destroyed the industrial base. And I think you've also got all these other kind of pressures out there, from post-COVID dynamics to what's happening with Russia and Ukraine, limiting global trade. China's turning a bit more authoritarian in its move and becoming...
As though it wasn't authoritarian enough.
Well, yes.
Yeah, you're right.
And even, the extent of market liberalisation is very much that you could argue led to a lot of their prosperity is now being reversed. On all over the places you can kind of make this argument that we're seeing a real turn against liberalism or the values and the ideas that drove the great enrichment. I suppose, how concerned are you? Should we be worried, and if so, what can we do about it?
I'm very concerned, but look, the demonstration effect is enormous. One of the reasons that what we used to call the Red China moved to free markets, at least in the economy, not the rest of life, was Hong Kong. Hong Kong's success. It was perfectly obvious. One of the great cities of China was run by the British with extremely light hand, and the result was that income per head, which in 1948 was the same in Hong Kong and in Red China, now income per head in Hong Kong is a little bit below that of the United States. Now, under the new Xi Jinping regime, it's going to go down. He's going to destroy Hong Kong, but that's too bad. But so the demonstration effect is great. That and my own country was the great demonstration effect. It was the United States was first Britain, then the United States were the great Anglophone examples, and then Australia and so forth, of economic and social success. And we're in danger of what would you say, of damaging it. Well, but I'm optimistic. I think we can win this debate, you and I, because we won it once. The birth of liberalism in the 18th century was a great event which caused the modern world, I say. It's liberalism. It's not the state. There are three great ideas that thinkers about society have had in the last 3 centuries. Liberalism was the first, then nationalism, then socialism. And if you like the last two, if you like nationalism and socialism, maybe you'll like national socialism. Maybe you'll like fascism. Because what did it for us was individual effort, individual creativity, individual liberty to be who you want to be, to be able to have a go, as the English say, not the state.
It seems, if you, let's say you see China as the great threat, I suppose, to the West or to the United States and the liberal world order, a lot of the response to that, I think, has been quite statist in nature, which is to say we can beat China by basically following China's model. We should pick our national champions.
But it's so phony, because there's no Chinese model. This whole phrase is ridiculous. It's a nonsense just by itself.
You don't think the Xi Jinping thought, the great leader?
No. He's a violation of what actually happened in China. What actually happened in China after 1978, my friend Steve Chung was one of the movers of it, was to convince the Chinese Communist Party to adopt markets for real estate and so on and so forth.
Agriculture and farming,
and that's what they did.
Having an entrepreneurial system.
Yeah, absolutely, it worked extremely well. That's the liberal model, dear. It's not the Chinese model. The Chinese part of it is the continuation of central planning and ideas from the center imposed on the rest of the society. So, their high-speed rail system, of which they have more trackage than the whole rest of the world combined, is glorious. I've been on it. It goes, it goes 150 miles an hour. It just whizzes along. No, it goes 200 miles an hour. Whizzes along. It's wonderful. It's cheap because it's massively subsidized. The whole thing. It's a ridiculous project for such a poor country to do. But it's the great state is imposing this. And this, their Belt and Road Initiative, which in journalistic terms everyone's afraid of, it's completely silly. It's like, on a rather larger scale, it's like the Anglo-French Concord. It's an economic failure built in.
Yeah, I know whether you've been following Sri Lanka recently, where they accepted a large amount of Chinese debt to build a port, to build an airport in the president's hometown, and now they're massively indebted and have got an economic crisis.
But they don't have to, because they could just say to the Chinese, so sorry, we're not paying. Now, in the 19th century, if you did that, we Europeans sent gunboats and made you do it. But China can't do that anymore. So if Kenya or Greece, the port of Piraeus, port of Athens, is owned by the Chinese. Volvo is owned by the Chinese, for that matter. And if the Greeks or the Kenyans, they're building a railway in Kenya, the Chinese are. Foreign investment is not enslavement unless you've got the gunboats. And the Chinese can't do it. It's not going to work in the modern world. So if I were the president of Kenya, and I'd say, oh yeah, come on, build the road, build the railway. Oh, thank you very much. Would you like to build some more stuff? Then I'd say, on a Tuesday, I'd say, so sorry, we're not paying you a cent. Go away.
I mean, this is what I always find quite fascinating when in Australia, in my home country, there's always this concern about Chinese interests buying up agricultural land. It's like, it's land, it's not going anywhere.
Feel free. Let them buy up the land, then expropriate it.
Well, yeah, I don't know, I wouldn't rush to expropriate, but certainly if you're in war with them.
That's what's happening with the what do they call the oligarchs in Russia with their yachts. People are nations are devising ways of seizing the yachts. By the way, as an Australian, what does 99.97 mean to you?
99.97.
Now, you should know this as an Aussie. That's Donald Bradman's test average.
Oh, yeah.
He was out for a duck for his last innings. His very last innings, his 0. And that got him below 100. 99.97.
99.
Should be engraved on your soul, dude.
the greatest batsman. What was Shane Warne's?
I don't know.
I wonder if it was anywhere near as good.
No, it wasn't. That's what's so amazing about Bradman. At Lord's, which I often go to, I love Lord's, they have this wonderful museum. As you come in a glass case are Sir Donald Bradman's boots. He was very fast. He could get out to the pitch of the ball.
It must have been great.
Oh, he must have been wonderful.
Boots.
Yeah.
I mean, I just kind of thinking earlier and before.
See, I love numbers. I'm quantitative, but I'm also literary.
You're the modern everything, aren't you? I mean, in terms of the main concerns we hear in debate today, and I'm kind of interested in your response to them. We're talking earlier about just historically it was the great debate about capitalism and socialism, which really enraged young people. Now it's all about the environment. It's about the sense in which the great enrichment, which you talk about, that say industrialization, has on net. I think that you'd make a kind of environmental case that we've depleted the world's resources. We've got limited carrying capacity for the planet. It's all over because of climate change. The apocalypse is near. If you want to go to the extreme sense of it, do you take any truth in that? Have we not protected the environment enough? Have we not?
So we have frequently said, for the last 100 years, longer actually, 150 years, some people have worried about the environment and said that we're about to run out of coal. That was one of the things they said in the 1860s, or we're about to have a catastrophe environmentally. And it hasn't happened. And I think that this doesn't mean there's no policy at all that I can think of that states should implement, but I think they should have a very light hand, maybe a carbon tax, and that then sort of stand back and let human innovation, which I'm always forgetting his name, as a famous economist said, human innovation is the ultimate resource. Oil in the ground doesn't matter until we have a little bit of organic chemistry to turn it into kerosene, and then suddenly it's important. And this happens over and over and over again. They're beginning to have some success, moderate success, with carbon capture, for example. In Iceland, where they've got virtually free energy because of thermal energy, they're on top of a volcano. They're having experiments with seizing carbon from the air, and I can see, but I can't see. If I could see, I would be smart. I would be rich. If I was so smart, I'd be rich. And the people talking about catastrophe act as though they know what the future will bring. And as a liberal, I'm not a conservative, so I don't want the world to go back to the 1950s. I'm not a progressive, as I was when I was a kid, thinking I know how to lay down the future because I know all about it. I know everything about it. I'm a liberal. I know there's uncertainty in the world, but I'm as again Matt says, I'm a rational optimist. I've seen it work for 2 centuries. It's enormously increased the scope of human life. Poverty in the world has been, to a large extent, alleviated. Not completely. We've got more to do, but it's getting better and better every day. And that's what we need to do. And I think the future is bright.
The other kind of narrative, particularly in the States, but also kind of creeps over into the UK, is this idea about empire, slavery, colonial exploitation.
Oh, yeah. That's madness.
As the kind of key driver of economic progress.
As I said, the conservative argument is that it's capital. These virtuous rich people save money by exploiting the poor, says the left. But anyway, save money and invest it. And that makes us rich, and that's nonsense. That's not true. But on the other side, on the left, they say, Britain is rich because they exploited India, or the United States is rich because it exploited slavery. Now, wait a second. If slavery were the way to wealth, Brazil would have led economic development in the West, not the United States. Brazilian slavery was a lot bigger and much closer to Africa. It was hard even for the fleet sent by Britain to stop the slave trade, to stop it, to go to Brazil. And furthermore, East African slave trade was much longer and about the same size as the Atlantic slave trade. East African was the slave trade into the Middle East. And then what? The Ottoman Empire would have been the place where enrichment happened. So it just doesn't make any sense. If apartheid in South Africa had enriched the white population, then the white population of South Africa would be richer than the white population of Australia, where, despite the horrible treatment of the Aborigines, obviously didn't depend on the Aboriginal labor or something, whereas in South Africa you can see that it did. But that's not true. Income per head in South Africa from, say, 1900 to the present of white people now rose at about the same rate as in Australia. So there's just no case at all that this generous, and I understand the ethical motivation, idea that we're rich because we were such terrible people in the past, and it's just not plausible. We're rich because of innovation, because of better glass, and better universities, and better marriages, because we've changed things.
Just kind of on a final topic, something that has become quite a big debate in the UK in recent months and recent years surrounds the issue of kind of trans rights. Yeah. Just recently, the Attorney General made a comment that she wanted to see schools be, I suppose, less welcoming of trans people. And they weren't legally obliged to recognise someone who's under the age of 18 who might want to transition. Yeah. They don't have to give them access to toilets or let them play in sports teams or whatever else the school choice might want to make. You've written about your experience as someone who is trans, involved in kind of the libertarian, conservative, liberal movement. I'm wondering what your feeling is on watching the debate in the UK.
Well, I'm shocked at how virulent it is over here. I blame Germaine Greer, one of your country.
I apologize for her.
Yeah, you really should. She's appalling. Sir Donald.
We even went to the same university, I think.
Did you really? Sir Donald Bradman, yes. Germaine Greer, no.
Yeah, pluses and minuses.
Yeah, she's horrible in this and has been for decades. And it's become absurdly virulent here on both sides. On the driving, what's her name, Kathleen Stock out of Sussex. I'm going to be teaching with her this summer at the new liberal university in Austin called the University of Austin. She and I will be teaching in the same week there. And on the one hand, the presumably pro-trans people are crazy and wish to do physical damage to her but on the other hand, people like the Attorney General are just cruel and stupid. What do you do with a little girl born female, XX genes, who says from the age of 2 years old, 3, 4, I'm a boy. Well, how soon am I going to grow a penis? What is this? I'm not going to wear a dress. To hell with dresses. I don't want a doll. I want a truck. What are you going to do with her? Are you going to torture her and say, no, dear, you can't transition until you have all secondary sexual characteristics of a female, and then we'll do the operations that I did from the other side on you. I mean, for God's sakes, it's just stupid. So look, as I said, as you pointed out at the beginning, or I said at the beginning, I'm a Christian liberal. And I believe that we owe an obligation to the poor and to the handicapped, and that we need a society of love. And the Attorney General is not expressing that. She is expressing a society of hate. Hate works politically. It was hate. Well, I won't get controversial by talking about Brexit, but still, hate runs politics much more than it should. Love should run politics. Now the problem is that our friends on the left think that love consists of me running your life, and I don't think so.
Well, on that note about love, thank you so much, Deirdre McCloskey, for joining us here at the IEA. For those who've enjoyed this discussion, please do subscribe to the IEA's YouTube channel, where you can get more video content throughout the week. And if you have a little bit of extra to support the IEA, please do sign up as a Patreon, and you can learn more about that on the IEA website at iea.org.uk. Thank you very much.
Well, if you enjoyed that conversation, why not watch one of these other videos? And while you're here, remember to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss out on a single IEA broadcast.